I find myself actually here at this conference in a unique environment. I'm a banker who works for IBM, and that's one thing. The other thing is that I grew up in Dubai, and I find myself back here after 25 years in a totally different environment, and the affinity that I have to Dubai is quite different than a lot of people would have. So this actually focuses on what one of my colleagues had started off with. When we at IBM look at something, we're not looking at the technology. We're looking at what is the technology going to do. So when we started looking at this very seriously about a year ago, it was not from a perspective of the work had been done, the technology makes sense, it's something that's going to improve and grow. But how do you apply it? What is the value that it brings to the businesses? And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. I was actually a little concerned about, we got through half of the day and nobody had actually talked about what blockchains is. So I appreciate Marco actually having gone through that exercise, because I was assuming that's going to be taken care of. But just to summarize, it's a shared, replicated, permissioned ledger technology. And what does that mean? It is a ledger that can be seen across by multiple entities at the same time. And permissioned is very important. We had a bit of a conversation around the permissioning earlier on in the discussion. Permissioning is very important when you go beyond just transacting or exchanging currencies. When people start exchanging information that are critical to them, especially businesses start exchanging their client information, they have to be very, very particular. And anybody who's worked with a bank and tried to integrate a bank to any public service knows that. It's a very, very difficult environment that you have to get your arms around. What we're looking at is that it'll be opening up business networks. One of those networks we're going to talk about, and that's to do around trade. By opening up business networks and actually bringing multiple industries to collaborate together is an environment that creates new business models. I mean, Kareem is a perfect business model. Kareem is actually, you come in, you bring them, you order for a car, and it's paid for, and you step out and you go on to your business. The payment of that transaction is in the background. Now, that business model would not have been possible if the technology wasn't there and electronic digital currencies weren't there, and you couldn't actually have credit cards. Now, that's now been over 60 years. But now, nevertheless, the progression of the technology is what has allowed us to get to this point today. The other thing that's of importance is, and this is very unique for IBM, whenever IBM has gone into something, we've always wanted to be, the owner of the platform. But in this particular case, when we started looking at this about 2.5 years ago, we came to the conclusion that for this, it had to be ubiquitous. And for it to be ubiquitous, it could not be a proprietary platform. And that's why we did not try to create a platform of our own. And again, as Anthony had pointed out earlier, we initially started off with 45,000 lines of code to a platform that was already out there by Linux. And then we've kept on building. There's a new iteration that's going to be coming out in about a month's time. And we're contributing multiple millions of lines of codes to those things. Just in a nutshell, before we get into the business processes, what is it that was going to be critical as far as the network goes, our blockchain network goes? You're going to have the traditional data sources. Every institution will want to has that data sources behind their firewall. So you've got those. You've got the users of the blockchain. You'll have regulators who are going to keep track of what's being done, how's it being done, are the country's elements taken care of, are the consumers' safeguards being taken care of. You've got the developers who are actually developing all of the different processes around the blockchain. And you have the network operators. The network operators, that's an open question right now. It's too early in the process or in the development of the technology to identify exactly what a network operator would be. Just to give you a perspective, I'd say about 95% of the transaction that's cross-border happens through SWIFT. SWIFT is that network operator. So that just gives you an idea. And then there's the certificate authority. That might change over time, but however, at this particular time, the perspective is that every entity that is participating in a blockchain is going to have a certain role that they play. And that role will be provided by the network operator through a certificate authority. So no IBM presentation can be complete without an architecture diagram. So we had to put this in. Though we had some people from within the organization who objected to this, but but the purpose of this is actually when we're looking at this platform, when we're looking at this architecture, we're going to identify there's going to be a membership. So for every entity, there will be a membership. You will be brought in as a member. Now, depending on the role that you're playing in that particular transaction, that membership, what you can access is going to vary. There's going to be the actual blockchain where each one of the status changes is going to be hashed and stored. There's the details of the transaction. The details of the transaction are, it would have to do with a payment. It would have to do with, the actual what is being moved from one place to the other. That detail is going to be captured and then saved on the blockchain. The most important thing here is the chain code. What blockchain is allowing us to do, and what this technology is allowing us to do, is it's allowing us to automate a lot of the processes. And by automating the processes, you can actually put it on the chain code. Once you put it on the chain code, you don't need manual intervention. And simplest example, going back to Kareem, there was a manual process where you either handed your credit card or you handed cash to the taxi driver. That process was automated, and now it happens in the background. You're still using, a credit card, but however, it's happening in the background. Now, a lot of the processes that happen in businesses today are going to be put into the chain code. So this is a very critical element. This is what majority of the work is going to go around. Right now, there's some development work that's going around the fabric. There's going on as to how fast can you actually get the transactions through, how many transactions you can get in a particular time period. There are elements around that. But the chain code is going to be critical as to how you can automate processes and how they can happen in the background. So now we start talking about trade. So when you're looking at trade today, there are multiple elements that are driving or that are frustrating to the participants. There's siloed processes. There are processes that happen in a particular area only. Now, we can look at it in broader perspective that this is a process that happens in a bank. This is the process that happens at a port. And within institutions, so within a bank, there are processes that happen within a particular department. So those are siloed processes, and they're not being broken through. There's a lot of documentation, a lot of paper that's flying around from one entity to another. So, there is a lot of, for example, we were at the Dubai ports, and there was a lot of digitization that's already been incorporated. However, it's basically document information that's been digitized, and it's still, the base element of it is still a document. The physical contracts, there were conversations going around as to what are the legalities around it. A trade, when you import something, a bill of lading is issued by the or an airway bill is offered by the shipping company, and that's what actually gives you the right to pick up the goods, or the right for the goods to be delivered to you. And that's a legal document. Where right now, there isn't any law that actually puts in place that an electronic document can be justified or can be used for that same purpose. So that's something that has to be overcome. And then there's inspections. Everybody wants to know. There are government entities that want to inspect. There are auditors that want to inspect. There are across all the players across the board. Now we come to the real thing. So when you look at trade, so actually I think I should start for a little higher up. So IBM, when we look through all of the different things, and we're still doing a lot of things in healthcare, we're doing a lot of things as far as loyalties go, so on and so forth. But we decided that we were going to spend and put all of our efforts around 3 areas. And the 3 areas are trade, security settlement, and compliance. Those are the 3 focus areas that IBM has decided is going to be the backbone of what we do around on the blockchain space. So we look at trade. There are 3 major entities in trade. You've got the banks, you've got the logistic companies, and you've got the ports. These are 3 major players as far as any single trade goes. Then around that are entities that do compliance. Compliance are all of the regulators. You need to provide compliance to regulators. There are regulators for banks, there are regulators for ports, there are regulators for logistic companies. You've got insurance companies. Insurance companies play a major role in every one of these things. And then you've got certifiers. So every time there's a transaction, you would have, well, not every time, but in a lot of times, you would have actually an entity. There are about 5 or 6 entities across the globe that go down to before the ship sails and validate that the particular goods that were boarded according to a letter of credit are the actual goods that were ordered, and they meet specifications of the importer. So these are the major players, and if you think through the processes in banks, you've got a lot of documentation that runs around the letter of credit. I mean, on average, there was a study done about 3 years ago. It takes 18 days for a letter of credit to be issued. And just think about what that includes. It has to have the agreement of the importer. The importer will come in and tell them, these are the goods I want to import from this particular country. This is going to be the exporter, and these are the specification of those goods. This is going to be the value of that transaction. This is going to be the ports that are going to be involved, and this is how it's got to be delivered. And then there's a whole set of terms and conditions that run. The bank has to look at it, and there are 3 pools of information that the bank has to run through. The UPC 600 is a standard that is run across for all trade. You've got every country has got its own regulations, that these goods can be imported, these goods cannot be imported. This is the tax that has to be applied to this particular type of good. This is the amount of this particular good that can be imported. And then they have to go and validate. Sometimes it's required a verification as to how much of this good has been imported in the past, and make sure that you don't exceed it through your letter of credit that you're issuing, because then you're liable as a bank. And then they've got also their own rules and regulations. Commodities, how much exposure are you taking to a particular commodity? How much exposure are you taking to a country? How much exposure are you taking to a particular currency? Because the trade might not happen in the currency of where you're importing from. There might be an exchange currency that you're using in the middle. So there's a lot of activity. So the person who's actually building that letter of credit has to have all of that information, pull that together, and then be able to have all of the terms and conditions of that letter of credit put in place. Nobody can do that consistently, day in, day out, let alone 500 people doing it consistently. So there's a lot of times, you have mishaps, you have things that are slipped through the process, and either the importer or the exporter is going to use that to their advantage. So you want to try to bring a lot of that consistency in place. The tools that you use for some of this are not tools that are absolutely brand new. It's actually, you'll use a smart contract. You will use innovative products such as Watson. By the way, it happens to be from IBM, but And it brings in logic to all of this information. So you take all of this information, you put it into Watson, it runs the logic through it, and then it provides you the background and builds this thing automatically for you. This is not a new technology. The smart contract's been around for over 10 years. But what's the difference? The difference is that a blockchain allows you, because it keeps track of every status change, and it gets everybody who's involved in that particular transaction to approve it. It gets everybody to be secure that this is the right information that is there and it's not being changed. In the past, on a smart contract, you could have two people change information on that contract. The third and the fourth person would not find out till when it's too late. Now, it's done real time. The other thing around a smart contract is that it's the same set of information that flows from one entity to the other. So you don't have transcriptions. So you don't have the situation. Actually, I think I should probably move to the next one. Yeah. So you don't have a situation where a trading company has got the invoice, which has got all the details, and all of that details needs to go into a letter of credit. So you don't have someone trying to summarize that or trying to take that information and transcribe that into a letter of credit or make decisions. I mean, simplest example would be the trader asked for 10,000 Apple computers. And the bill of lading reads 3 stacks of Apple computers. Now, the 3 stacks could actually have 10,000 Apple computers, but someone will have to go in there and verify that. You don't know that. And the banks only deal in documentary credit. They don't deal in actual physical goods. So they don't have that information. There has to be, it creates a complexity in that environment. Whereas if you're using the invoice of the trading company and that's going into the letter of credit and it's the same document, there's no complexity there. The bank issues the letter of credit. The logistic company then has to issue the bill of lading. The bill of lading actually is the right to the goods. And it moves it from one entity to the other. So when a bill of lading is issued to the exporter, it goes from the exporter to the exporting bank. Then once the exporting bank has made payment to the exporter, then they are the owner of that good. And that's the bill of lading is going to provide that information. It gives them that right. Now, the bill of lading is a legal document. That has to be shipped from there to the importing bank. Then the importing bank makes the payment to the exporting bank. And now the bill of lading gives them the right to those goods. So when the ship actually arrives in the importing country, the bill of lading is what gives them the right to any entity to actually collect the goods. Whatever reason might be, the bank might decide that, listen, I'm not giving it to the importer. So then it goes into a secure place at the port. Again, the bill of lading gives them that right to maintain that. So, now, imagine an environment where all of this is happening in the background. Nobody is physically involved in this process. This is what the blockchain offers you. It offers you the ability to move as much of it offline and happening by itself as much as you want. Every bank, to start off with, I can guarantee you, is not going to do this electronically. They're going to keep a control, whether that happens from the invoice, from the trader's perspective, starting off a letter of credit, initiating the letter of credit. They might start with saying, okay, we've given you the facilities, you do the letter of credit online, you make an agreement between your importer and the exporter, you agree on the prices, do all of that online, and then someone at the bank says, okay, do I agree with all of this thing or not? And then they'll press the button, and then it'll go through the process and issue a letter of credit. Even before the letter of credit is actually shipped out, they'll keep track of there'll be someone involved in this. But over time, a lot of this is going to be automated, and people will take it into account, and it'll happen by itself. Behind all of this is all of the payment elements that go through. Now, imagine all of the payments going through by themselves automatically. When the documents, when it's been approved from the exporting bank, the payment goes through and it's received at the importing bank. Right now, they have 5 days to approve it or send it back. They don't need 5 days because the same technology that is making sure that the letter of credit, that all of the documents apply or satisfy the requirements of the letter of credit, is checking it on the exporting bank side, and it's the same technology that is supporting it or checking it at the importing bank side. And that transaction can happen in the background by itself. So that is an ultimate scenario. I would think, actually, at the speed that things have been going, that we could possibly see that happening in the next 3 to 5 years. A little bit of background around this is, we were thinking that we'd do 35 POCs by the end of this year, and we'd be stars. We had got so many when we opened the door and we started talking to people and asking them to, inviting them for POCs. We've got such a huge flow of requests that we actually had to put up a deal review board. And now every POC that comes in from anywhere in the world has to actually go through that deal review board. And it's a pretty strenuous exercise justifying why this is the right POC for us to submit and support. So the pace of change is phenomenal. And it's very exciting for us. Yeah. Thank you very much.